there's some of you may be familiar, maybe all of you are familiar with a practice that there is a custom that a lot of Jews have to stay up the night of Shavuos. So the night of Shavuos, a lot of people are up the whole night, don't go to sleep. This is obviously the prevalent custom around here. We stay up all night, learn Torah all night, and then at dawn, at Alois HaShachar, people go to bed. Now, the primary reason for this is as what's called a tikkun. A tikkun means a reparation. So it's a reparation for something wrong that happened, that we were a big part of, during the original incident that Shavuos, or that we commemorate on Shavuos. And again, technically I don't say Shavuos commemorates, because Shavuos and Matan Torah are technically separate, as we discussed a few weeks ago. So the giving of the Torah was on, let's call it the 6th of Sivan. Shavuos is 50 days after the 7th day of Pesach. And technically speaking, they wouldn't have to overlap always, because there could be a variation between 5th, 6th, and 7th day of Sivan for the first day of Shavuos, depending on the length of the 2 months of Nisan and Iyar. Now, today we have a fixed calendar because we don't have a Sanhedrin that can set the months based on the moon, based on the evidence of witnesses. So it works out that Shavuos always is on the 6th of Sivan, and we commemorate the giving of the Torah, which happened on the 6th of Sivan, on Shavuos.
Do you have extra copies?
Yes, I do. Where are they? Here. Does anyone else need copies? It's both. Let me just pass them down, I guess. Yeah. I think Leah needs as well. Okay, so there's a medrash that says that on the night of Shavuos, on the night of Matan Torah, when the Torah was being given at Har Sinai, the Jewish people, it says, Bnei Yisrael yoshnu kol halayla. The Jewish people slept the whole night before the Torah was given. And this is a medrash that's addressing the pasuk. The pasuk says, Vayihi, and it was as the morning approached, and there was thunder and lightning. And so the medrash is addressing in part, what was the thunder and lightning about? And so it says something very interesting. It says that the Jewish people slept through the night, and we knew that when dawn comes, Hashem's giving us the Torah. But we slept in. And so the Midrash says, Shina, the sleep on that night was sweet. Shina Areva, it was a sweet sleep. The night was short. And the sleep was sweet to the extent that they weren't, even insects, fleas, did not bite them. They were undisturbed. Even forces of nature that would generally disturb people who are sleeping in the wild they didn't interfere. They didn't disturb the people who were asleep that night, the Jews, on the eve of the giving of the Torah. And so they were just having this most incredible, amazing sleep. The sleep was sweet. And they didn't wake up on time. They slept in. So Hashem rocks up to Har Sinai. He's like, hey guys, I'm here to give the Torah. Where is everyone? So then comes the thunder and lightning and says, guys, get up. So the Midrash is giving us some context behind one of the reasons why this thunder and lightning happened. It was to wake us up because we were asleep. Does this story seem a little... so just before we move on, and this is one of the reasons why, this is the primary reason for the custom why we stay up at night on Shavuos, as a reparation for that. We slept in. We shouldn't have slept in. This is like the most momentous event in the history of the Jewish people, and we just slept in. That wasn't cool. So, to make up for that, we stay up all night until dawn, until the time when the Torah was given. And once we say, okay, we stayed up, we learned Torah all night, we were up at the moment of the giving of the Torah, now and then many people, probably most people who stay up all night will go to sleep either then and then get up and daven afterwards, or some people will daven and then go to sleep. Does the story seem a little strange to anyone? Mm-hmm. What seems strange specifically? I'm not challenging, I'm just trying to pull it out.
Well, it's the most exciting event of mankind. Why would you fall asleep?
Right. And just to make it a little more specific, because that could be very subjective, right? You and I agree that this is like super exciting, but maybe they didn't.
So we're counting the days.
Exactly. So we have a mitzvah of counting the Omer, which we're doing now. We're nearly done. And we discussed a couple weeks ago a couple of the different angles, a couple of different, elements that are part of this mitzvah of counting the Omer. But one that we didn't touch on is the original historic context of counting the Omer. And this comes from a medrash. There's a medrash that says that when the Jewish people left Egypt, Moshe comes, the plagues are done, we're leaving Egypt, and we say, well, okay, and we're leaving Egypt, and what? Where are we going? What's happening? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, in 50 days, we're going to be at Mount Sinai, and Hashem's going to give us the Torah. And we were just so excited, we start counting down. 50 days, 49 days, 48 days, 47 days, we're counting down. And this was the original first counting of the Omer. Now, obviously, this is not the halachic basis for counting the Omer. The halachic basis for counting the Omer is very clear. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah sasei doreisa. It's a scriptural obligation. The Torah says, and you shall count 7 weeks from the time when the Omer sacrifice is brought, and then at the end of those 7 weeks will be Shavuos. But another layer, another element that's involved in this counting is the fact that this is something that's done as a countdown in excitement. So the Medrash says that they were counting down. It's not that we think that it's exciting and we think that they should have been excited. They actually were excited. They started counting down the Omer of their own initiative. They were counting down to the giving of the Torah out of excitement. They were looking forward and they started to count voluntarily. Now, if there's something that's so exciting that you're counting down day by day from 7 weeks out, it's fair to expect that as it gets closer, you're going to get more excited, not less. The excitement's going to build and build and build. And you would kind of think that when that night comes along, they're going to be so excited, they're not even going to be able to fall asleep, let alone sleep in the morning. It's when you have something really exciting in the morning, whether it's something that's exciting in a positive way, whether it's something that makes you nervous, something scary. A lot of times, it's a very common phenomenon that people have a hard time falling asleep because they're thinking so much about what's going to happen in the morning. And then 2 hours before you get up in the morning, you finally fall asleep. And then when you have to wake up, it's kind of painful. Or if you do manage to fall asleep on time, you would expect that the opposite would happen. You'd wake up in the morning out of excitement and anticipation, or out of trepidation if it's something that's more scary rather than a positive excitement. But it just doesn't seem to add up. They were excited. We know they were excited. It's not just that they should have been excited. They decided voluntarily of their own initiative to start counting down day by day from 7 weeks out. So how does it make sense that on this night, the night before, they know in the morning it's finally happening, we've been counting down for 7 weeks. Let's go to sleep and we'll just sleep in. Something doesn't add up. There's something about this story that's going to be missing. And another element, another angle that's important also in terms of this same question is not just the fact that they were excited. The idea is similar, but it's a little different. And that is that we discussed about the counting of the Omer, the preparation day by day, refining ourselves. It's a process of self-development. What just happened? It's a process of self-development, and they were working on bettering themselves one day at a time. So, and it was a real thing. It's the taking, when we broke it down, the 7 minutes, the 7 emotional components of the soul, and not just the 7, but breaking each one down into 7 subcomponents. So we're really getting at it at the details. They were working on themselves. They were improving themselves. So we have number one, people who were so excited. They've been spending 7 weeks voluntarily counting down for 50 days to get to this point. They should have been so excited they couldn't fall asleep and they couldn't stay asleep. They should have been up in the morning. And additionally, coming up from a less mundane, let's call it, angle, these were people who'd been working on refining themselves, refining their animal souls, getting their animal souls less and less animalistic, less and less materialistic, more and more in touch with Torah, with divinity, with spirituality, with godliness. How is it that people who just worked so hard on developing themselves and made such progress in terms of tuning themselves to be more in touch with godliness, with purpose, with Hashem, the Creator, spirituality, that this occasion comes and then just whatever, sleep in, it's cool. There's a lot about this that isn't adding up. Now, when I say that there's a lot about this that isn't adding up, just to clarify, it doesn't mean that I'm challenging the Medrash. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. It means that clearly there's a piece of information or perspective that we are missing. And if we can find that, it'll make everything fit in. So let's talk about what that perspective might be. One of the themes that I talk a lot about in this class is the difference between matter and spirit, body and soul. Right? Body is a physical entity, and the soul is a non-physical entity. It doesn't physically exist. Matter and spirit do not exist in the same reality. Their existence is not measured or defined by the same parameters. As far as the physical universe is concerned, spirituality doesn't exist. As far as spirituality is concerned, the physical world doesn't exist. They're very separate. They're very different. In fact, in the bracha, there's a bracha we say in morning blessings. People say it after using the bathroom. The bracha that's known as Asher Yotzar, it ends, "Blessed are you, Hashem, roifei chol basar, who heals all flesh, umafli la'asos," and loosely translated as, and does wondrous things. Mafli la'asos, does wonders. Mafli comes from the word pella. It's a verb of a wonder. It does wondrous things. Now, what these wondrous things are, what it refers to, is a number of things. Obviously, in the most basic and fundamental level, what it's referring to is in the context of the bracha. It's a bracha that we say to thank Hashem for our health. So we say it in the morning. We say it after, people say it after using the bathroom, because these are processes and things that are important for health, and we're thanking Hashem for giving us health. Now, people often, because of the way that we experience life and we experience our own lives and the gift of life, people will ask, someone's not feeling well, something's hurting, something's not going quite right in their body. Well, why is this happening? And obviously that's a valid question, an important question, especially technically. If you want to treat something, you have to understand what's going wrong. But it's not like that's, like a wondrous question. How could something be going wrong in the body? The question is really the opposite. First of all, you just think about how many systems there are in the body. And then the number of organs in the body. You have skin, you have lungs, you have heart, you have pancreas, you have kidneys, the list goes on and on and on. You have brain, you have the rest of the central nervous system, you have all the nerves, you have all the different kinds of tissues. You have eyes, ears, the nerves that carry and transmit messages from every part of it. And then each of these tissue types and each of these organs is made up of probably billions, for sure millions of cells. And a cell is something that you can't see with the naked eye. It's microscopic. You need a device that's able to magnify an image many, many times to be able to see a cell, because it's so small. And when you look at a cell under a light microscope in high school, it's like, wow, amazing. It's so small. And then with further advances in technology, and you get down to electron microscopes, a cell is like a universe, right? We have, I don't know how many billions, trillions, whatever it is, of cells in the human body. Every single one of them is like an entire universe. There are, many, many different kinds of organelles, little, particles within a cell that play different roles. And there's, I don't know again what the number is, thousands, tens of thousands, more, millions, I don't know, of chemical reactions and interactions that are happening at any given instant in any given cell. And within this cell, all these things, all the organelles, the nucleus and the mitochondria, and the list goes on, they're all interacting with each other. And they're all sending each other feedback to keep all of the things that are going on in harmony. And these are the things that are controlling everything. And what we experience as life, as a human life as we know it, is just this literally unfathomably complex combination of billions or trillions of cells, each with thousands or hundreds of thousands or whatever it is, different things happening within every given cell, all in perfect balance and harmony, and all the cells working with each other within a given tissue type, and the different tissue types working together within an organ and the different organs working together within a body. It's just the fact that this could even work for a millisecond is just really mind-blowing. So when we finish this bracha and we're thanking Hashem for our health, we say that thank you Hashem umafli lasos, who does wonders. Health, life itself is just absurd, really. If you think about the technicalities of what it takes for life to exist, it's insane. Which is why when we thank Hashem for our health, we say, thank you Hashem, who heals all flesh and does wonders, because life and health are very, very literally wondrous. There's also another layer to what we're referring to when we thank Hashem for doing wonders. And it has to do also with our health and our experience as people who are alive. And that is bringing the body and the soul into partnership. Because a body shouldn't be able to interact with the soul. A body is made out of physical matter, physical energy. It's made out of molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, etc. A body is a physical entity. And the soul is a non-physical entity. The soul isn't made out of physical mass. It's not made out of physical energy. It doesn't physically exist. So how can something that doesn't physically exist, and again, just to qualify, to make sure that it doesn't potentially get taken out of context, when I say it doesn't physically exist, that doesn't mean it's any less real. It's at least equally as real as that which does physically exist. It just exists in a different plane, in a different context, in a different reality. It's defined by a completely different set of parameters. The existence of spirit, the existence of the soul. So how is it that something that doesn't physically exist has an interactive, intimate relationship with something that does physically exist? How can the body and the soul be partners to the extent that a person by definition needs to be a partnership of body and soul, because without a body there would be no person and without a soul there would be no person? You would effectively have a steak and an angel or something similar to it, neither of which exists as far as the other is concerned. So how is it that the body and the soul are able to have this relationship? How is it that a person or any living entity can exist? And this is what we are thanking Hashem for. Thank you Hashem, who heals all flesh and does wonders. Hashem, the creator, who is absolutely infinite, both in terms of quantity, size, bigness, and in terms of quality, in terms of its nature, description, characteristics, that infinite creator created the rules that govern the nature of a physical reality and the rules that govern the nature of a spiritual reality, and the fact that they cannot intermingle. That creator who voluntarily created those parameters that keep matter and spirit apart is obviously able to override that. So the creator allows the body and soul to come together in every individual instance of a living entity. And truly everything that exists, really, even a rock has a soul. But obviously it's something that's more tangible and something that's easier to relate to in the context of something that we perceive as being alive. Do you mind to just push that button in the back? Perfect, thank you. I'm not sure what's going on. I'll have to check it. Oh, I know what it is. Okay. Obviously, Hashem, the creator, is able to bring matter and spirit together. It's an unnatural phenomenon, but that the creator is the one who created the natures that define that as being an unnatural phenomenon. So the creator can do it, and we thank the creator for doing that to allow us to be able to experience life, because he has allowed body and soul to come together. So body and soul are very different. Very, very different. Anything that exists in the world of the body, anything that exists, anything, let's put it this way, anything whose existence is defined by the same parameters that define the physical body, which basically means anything that physically exists, anything that's physical, could potentially interact with the body. The body can potentially interact with it. Because as far as the body's concerned, physical entities exist. As far as physical entities are concerned, the body exists. And we can interact with them. We can touch them. We can move them. The body can create sound waves that can then be perceived, heard by other individuals, people, animals. We can do things that they can see. So we are able to interact with the physical world. Our physical bodies are able to interact with the physical world around us, and every component potentially, hypothetically at least, that's a part of the physical reality. Because they all exist equally as really in the same context. They're defined by the same parameters. The soul doesn't exist as far as the parameters that define physical existence are concerned. The soul isn't a part of the physical world. The soul cannot interact with the physical world. The soul can't touch things. The soul can't make sounds. The body can make sounds. The soul can't move things. So what happens is that the Creator does this wondrous thing and gives the body and the soul the ability to interact and to have this relationship, which now means that the soul, by means of its partnership with the body, is able to interact with the world. So because the soul works together with the body as partners, this soul-body partnership, aka person, can interact with the world. So the body is like a tool that the soul uses to interact with the world. But anything, if we look at the soul in and of itself, not in the context of its relationship with the body, but just as a soul independently, it has no way of experiencing the world, and it has no way of allowing the world to experience it. Because as far as it's concerned, the world doesn't exist, and as far as the world's concerned, it doesn't exist. And the same is true in the reverse. The body can't interact with spirituality because the soul is physical. As far as the parameters that define spirituality are concerned, the body doesn't exist. It doesn't fit into that category. It's not part of that reality. It's not part of that realm. So the separation between matter and spirit is a very real thing. Now, one would think, and this would be a very logical conclusion to reach after thinking about that and processing this, understanding this background and this foundation, it would be a reasonable, logical conclusion to reach that if one wants to interact with a spiritual entity, it would be a good idea to focus primarily on the soul, to try and remove the body from the picture as much as possible, because the body doesn't work with spirituality. Think about it, in the context of, let's say, for example, you have, a business. And I tend to use this as an analogy relatively frequently because it's very different and it's something that's, probably a lot more tangible for most people. If you have a business, and obviously in a good sized business, you have different people that have very different roles. And you may have someone who's, who, let's say, for example, has a role that's very technical and they don't really have to interact with other people. They sit in a room behind a desk and, the person doesn't have the most pleasing and comfortable personality to deal with. And the person can be really nasty and rough and just, a bit toxic. But if the person has a position that specifically means that they don't have to interact with anyone, it doesn't necessarily, it's probably not a good idea for your director of HR to be a person with a toxic personality. But if someone specifically has a role that doesn't require them to engage with anyone, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad idea to involve them in your business. But if you're then going to have a meeting with an investor or with whatever it is, someone you want to impress, you want to make sure that that person's not at the meeting. Because that person and this meeting are not going to be a good combination. Because that person just doesn't jive with other people. Just keep them far away because they could crash and destroy the whole thing. Matter and spirit don't jive. And to an extent, they're actually contradictory. There's an expression that says, and it's careful to keep this in context, and I'll try to clarify it somewhat, that the strength of the body is weakness of the soul. Now, it's very important to keep this in context because at the same time we know that there's an expression that comes from the Baal Shem Tov that says that a small hole in the body leads to a large hole in the soul. So it's not recommended to jeopardize the health of or to weaken the body. That's not a good idea because the soul needs the body to do its job. And we're supposed to be alive. We're instructed by the Torah. We're obligated to look after our health. So what does it mean that strength in the body is weakness of the soul? It doesn't mean physical health. It means strength in terms of the material orientedness. So a physical body, naturally, look at animals, right? In the animal kingdom, it's not considered to be a negative or cruel thing when, let's say, for example, a carnivorous animal eats another animal, right? Like, it's not so nice, but that's just what they were designed to do. An animal, by nature, experiences urges to, from a technical perspective, well, let's talk about it in terms of first purpose-wise. An animal experiences urges that are designed, from a biological perspective, to increase its longevity, to allow it to live a long life, to allow it to procreate and to continue the existence of its species, right? That's the biological function of any given entity. From a strictly biological perspective, is to continue the existence of its species, which is where the whole evolution thing comes in. And that's a can of worms I'm definitely not opening right now. Right? So, because animals need to be nourished to be able to live and to be able to reproduce, their bodies are designed in a way that when the nutrient levels in their systems, in their blood, go down, their brain gives them a sensation of hunger, which is uncomfortable. It can become painful. The animal says, ooh, this doesn't feel good. Let me go find some food so I don't feel hungry anymore. And if it's a herbivore, it's going to go find some plants to eat. If it's a carnivore, it's going to go find some animals to eat. So we have, this process of animal feeling hungry and going to get food can be looked at from a number of different levels. Number one is experientially, in terms of what the animal's experiencing. It experiences hunger. It wants food. It goes find food and it eats. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, that's kind of mean. Well, the animal's hungry. The lion's hungry. So therefore it has to go, it's hungry and therefore it has to go kill a cow so that it can eat, or a deer or whatever it is. Like, that's not fair. Like, you're hungry, so that has to die. And that's something a discussion that we as people can have. But animals don't really have the capacity for abstract thought. And biologically, that's one of the things that separates humans from animals, is the ability to have abstract thought and articulate speech, and they really go hand in hand together very much. So an animal experiences hunger, and therefore it looks for food to get rid of the hunger. What's happening here is that these are designs that are built into the nature of the animal because the function of the animal is to continue living and to reproduce so that its species can continue. Therefore, it has systems built into its body so that when its nutrient levels are low, it will try to acquire more nutrients. So that's from a very technical perspective. Its nutrition level is low. Thank you. So from a technical perspective, the animal's nutrition is low. It pursues more nutrition. It wants to acquire nutrients. From an experiential perspective, the animal feels hungry. It doesn't like the way it feels when it's hungry, so it goes to find food so it shouldn't feel hungry anymore. So what the animal's doing experientially is trying to make itself feel better. It feels an urge. It wants food. It goes to find food. It's that simple. It's tired. It wants sleep. It goes to get some sleep. It's thirsty. It goes to find some water. Now, these are biologically very practical systems that are built in. The fact that an animal that needs rest feels tired is a very effective mechanism, and it's productive. It's helpful for the animal to continue living. The fact that when nutrients are low, we feel hungry is a good thing. The fact that when we're dehydrated, we feel thirsty and we want water is a good thing. But at the end of the day, and whilst this isn't a bad thing, the same way that you wouldn't say that when a carnivorous animal goes to find prey, it's not being immoral. It's not doing something bad. That's just what it's created to do. When it comes to humans, it's a lot more complex. Because we do have abstract thought, we do have articulate speech, we are able to process ideas. We don't just have urges and instincts and things that we react to. The thing we have that animals don't from a biological perspective primarily is articulate speech and abstract thought, which means we can understand a concept of morality. We can understand a concept of putting others, weighing up the needs of others against the needs of ourselves, weighing up the interests of others against the interests of ourselves, weighing up the collective interest of humanity and of the universe against our own interest, weighing up the interests of the divine purpose of existence against our own interests. These are things you can only do if you have the ability to process abstract thought, which is something that's unique to humans. So on one hand, the body, which is in a large part animalistic by nature, the human body, we experience urges, and we probably experience a lot of unique urges that animals don't experience, a lot of which are not probably fantastic. You know, things like rage, anger is something that I would expect, I think, probably does exist in the animal kingdom, but in a specific context with a specific biological function. You know, it's the same thing with tribalism, with all these things. They exist in the animal kingdom because they have a function. The fact that an animal gets furious, the fact that a animal will get into a rage if it feels that someone or something is jeopardizing the safety of its child, and will go into a mad fit of rage, that has a biological purpose, which is to continue the existence of its species by protecting its offspring. So that anger has a purpose. Now, humans can get angry at times when it makes sense. We can also, on occasion, there is such a phenomenon as people getting angry in a situation and in a way that is not necessarily productive. And it's the same with lots of things. You know, we take all kinds of natural urges which exist throughout the entirety of existence, you know, for plants in their own way and for animals in their own way, and the equivalent things that they experience, the equivalent urges that they experience, we experience, but we also, because we have abstract thought, we complicate things and take things out of context a lot as well. Out of the context in terms of the biological purpose of these urges. But the bottom line is the role of an animal, the role of the body, is to experience urges, to use these urges as a means of reacting to an issue and to respond correctively so that it can continue to be alive. You're hungry, you don't have sufficient nutrients in your system, you feel hungry so that you'll eat to get rid of the hunger. Dehydrated, you feel thirsty so that you'll go find some water to get rid of to solve the dehydration. If an entity's offspring is in danger, it will feel anger and a sense of, and this is also part of the biological function of tribalism, for example, that you want to protect your own at the expense of others if necessary, which means that every species will do its utmost to protect its own, to allow it to continue. And when each species does that, in balance the right way, species, they can all continue to exist. And now, there's the collateral damage, obviously, that's spread around. But if there was no if there was no sense of tribalism and there was no rage that an animal experiences when its child is in danger, half the species in the world would have probably been killed off, the day after they were created. Before the end of the week of creation, they would have all been dead already. So the body is designed to experience urges that motivate it at a very basic level to take corrective action to allow it to continue functioning. And as I mentioned earlier, us humans, being very complicated, can at times take some of those urges out of context. Just one example that, it's not necessarily the best example, but it's a quick and easy one. The culinary industry. How much money gets spent, and this is not an attack on people who like food. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I like to cook and I like to make food that tastes and looks good. But the fact is that this whole culinary industry is based on the desire to eat good food, which is based underneath on the biological urge to maintain nutrition by acquiring food and eating it and getting it into our system. So animals are hungry, they look for food. People are hungry, they look for food, but we think abstractly, we're like, oh, imagine if I would adjust this and add this to the recipe and change that. Imagine how good that would taste. Right? And then things that look appealing, the fact that things that look nice attract our attention, also across a range of contexts, has biological functions. Right? Just, imagine that we were animals in the wild and that you saw meat, and then one, carnivorous animals, a lion, it's walking around, it sees a piece of meat that looks nasty and spoiled, and it sees a piece of meat that looks fresh and good. It's in the best interest of the longevity of the lion to eat the meat that looks good, because it's going to be better nutrition. So, again, it has a biological function. We see things that look nice, they attract our attention and they attract our interest. But that doesn't mean that we then have to spend millions and billions of dollars, biologically, at least from a biological perspective, on research to come up with substances that when you add this to this kind of topping, it'll make it 8% shinier, which is then going to increase the customer's interest in buying it by 3%, and then you'll make this much more money at the end of the year, right? That's not a biological function. I mean, it's based on biological function probably if you trace it down deep enough, because we want to have money so that it gives us perhaps a sense of security, which obviously blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, our responses to our urges gets taken way out of context. So when we say strengthening the body is weakening the soul, what it means is that when we strengthen the tendency of the body to react to its urges, which in the context of human animals includes I'm certain that the vast majority of urges that any given person experiences throughout the day, urges, things that catch our attention, things that catch our interest, things that get us interested in pursuing them. I'm sure that for your average person, maybe I shouldn't say everyone, but for your average person, the vast majority of them are not directly related to a specific biological outcome. AKA, people have urges and people want stuff, not necessarily because of a specific reason, but because we have kind of modified those things, and with our abstract thought, we've allowed the interest in food that looks appealing because it's going to be good for us to interested in food that looks appealing, and that appeal makes it look like it's probably going to taste a little bit better. It's going to be a little sweeter. It's going to be a little more tangy. It's going to have a bit more moisture. It's going to have a better texture. And that's why I want that one rather than that one. So it all has a basis, but in the context of humans, it gets taken out of the biological context very far, very often. So when we just respond to the urges of our bodies, and when the tendency of the body, which is natural, this is part of the nature of humans that we have these urges, which is why it happens. When our body is strong in the context of having a strong emphasis on its tendency to be attracted to and interested by these urges and then to pursue them, that is a weakening of the soul. Because the soul wants to use the body as a partner in making the world divine, as a partner in using out the world for its divine purpose. The soul's interest is partnering with the body to find ways to use materials to make the world a better place. The soul wants to partner with the body to use the technologies and the things we have access to unite matter and spirit, to bring divinity into the world, to do mitzvahs, to help people, rather than to emphasize the materialism of the world, to shift the world in the other direction, not to destroy the world, not to destroy the material nature of the world, because if it wasn't supposed to have a material nature, it wouldn't have been made that way. The world's supposed to have a material nature, and our bodies are supposed to have a material nature. Our job is to shift that material nature away from being materially oriented in terms of its orientation, what it pursues, what it's primarily interested by, and adjust it to be more spiritually oriented. Because the fact is, if someone is focused on material experiences, material pleasure, the pursuit of material satisfaction, that is going to mean that their body at this time is materially oriented, which means it by definition cannot be equally spiritually oriented because they don't coexist. And if you're focused on one, you are going by definition to be, as you become more focused on either one, you by definition become less focused on the other. So as a person, and this is kind of, ties into the issue we have with these people at the giving of the Torah, they were people who had just spent 7 weeks. And it wasn't just like, project for 7 weeks. They broke it down into 49 specific steps, one day at a time. Work on ourselves. Work on this element of our character to make it a little less materially oriented, a little more spiritually oriented. So they had really micromanaged themselves to shift every part of themselves to be more spiritually oriented. It doesn't seem to make sense that they then just slept in. Right? So being more spiritually oriented by definition means being less materially oriented. Because they are in a way opposites. And when you're focused on one, when you're more focused on one, you're less focused on the other. So now, keeping all of this in mind, the fact that body and soul are, the partnership between body and soul is in a way the basis of creation of everything, the physical universe and the spiritual universes. Because the point is the union of matter and spirit in this world, and the agent that can do that is the union of matter and spirit in the body, in the individual. So that's what it's all about. But the fact is, the more we, we could do social experiments on ourselves. If we really work, and it's kind of hard to do it for the sake of a social experiment, because if it's a social experiment, it's not going to be as likely to work. But, if you could do it, on other people, for example, if you were to, and it doesn't have to be engineered, it could just be studying the outcomes of a natural situation. But if you have a group of people who over a significant period of time, are really working on getting more focused on and in touch with the purpose of existence, the purpose for their own existence, the reason that they're here, the purpose of the existence of the world, learning about spirituality, about divinity, becoming more in touch with these abstract things and more focused on the purpose and importance of these abstract things, the spirituality, divinity, godliness, etc. That person with time, without even realizing it, is going to become gradually less and less motivated by the prettier food and the prettier car, etc., etc., etc. Because that person has shifted their interests, and it's a natural outcome. And, when a person does the reverse, if a person just, really gets involved in the material aspects of their life, they are, practically speaking, going to have a much harder time focusing on and connecting with spirituality and these sorts of abstract things. Because, from a within the world of matter, abstract, or within the world of, human experience from a more mundane perspective, I would call it, abstract and concrete are opposites. And the fact is, you can see this in the way people think. There are some people who, have a tendency to excel at abstract thought, and those people will often have a lesser tendency to excel at things that we would describe as concrete thought, and the same is true in the reverse. Because they're to an extent, they are opposite in nature. And there obviously are going to be people who can excel at both, but generally speaking, as a rule, being better at one tends to be associated with being less excellent at the one that's opposite. That's just the way it goes. So, and this is true of matter and spirit. So, these people now have spent 7 weeks, the Jewish people, they've spent 7 weeks refining themselves, emphasizing and getting focused on spirituality, on purpose, refining their characters, making their bodies not less healthy and strong, but less materially oriented, less urge oriented, and more purpose oriented. They come now, it's the night before the Torah is going to be given. The Torah is about to be given. What's the Torah? Torah is information, but so is lots of other things. The thing about Torah that's different to other, let's call it disciplines, other academic disciplines, let's say, the thing that separates it is this is divine information. This is information that has God within it, has the Creator within it. Now, do you think that the body is going to be more effective at experiencing divinity? Or is the soul going to be more effective at experiencing divinity? The soul, obviously. Right? Hopefully. I think it's pretty obvious. And apparently so do you. If anybody disagrees or thinks otherwise, you're welcome to speak up. Right, so here these people are, they're like, yes, we've been counting down for 7 weeks. Tomorrow morning the Torah is going to be given. What happens during sleep? A lot of things happen during sleep. There are a lot of things that happen in a person's brain during sleep. Obviously, it's a very important time for processing and categorizing thoughts, etc. It's a time when the body recovers from the stress that it's experienced during the day and repairs things. And it's also a time when it's written that the soul actually partially departs the body. So a person's alive, obviously, when they're asleep. So obviously there is still an interaction between the body and the soul. But the same way that the body is undergoing cleansing, repair, maintenance, the soul does the same thing. And because the soul's maintenance and repair is primarily not going to happen most effectively in the body, the soul partially departs from the body and it gets its own maintenance and repair as the body's getting its maintenance and repair. So if you think about it, imagine the soul. If the soul is now going to experience the giving of the Torah, experience the divinity, it can do that either while it's partnered with and working through the body, or it can do it when it's free of the body. Which time do you think which state is going to be more effective? It's going to be more effective when it's free of the body. So the people said, let's go to sleep. Let's allow our souls to partially depart our bodies. They will be less tied down by the limitations of our bodies, and they will be able to be much more in touch and connected when they receive the Torah.
Like the Navi, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why all these things happen to the Nevi'im. So now the story's making a lot more sense, right? It wasn't like they were super excited and then, whatever. It was they were super excited and said, yes, let's max this opportunity out as much as we possibly can. This is going to be the true value of the Torah is spiritual. Let's free our souls of our bodies as much as we can whilst still being alive, because no one thinks it's a good idea to die to get the Torah, even though everyone did die twice. That happened later on in the day while the Torah was being given. And thank God we came back, or we were brought back by the Creator. So they wanted to be alive, but for their souls to be as free of the limitations of their bodies as possible, so they went to sleep. Makes a lot of sense. Both in terms of both of the issues that, I raised before. One is they were super excited. What happened to that? This happened to that. They were still excited and they were trying to figure out the best way to go about it. And number two, they had refined themselves spiritually, again, which is why they wanted to do this. So then the question remains, if this was their reason, two things. Why didn't Hashem say, hey guys, awesome idea, let's do this, and give the Torah while they were asleep? Number one. And number two, why do we have to repair that and stay up all night? If it was such a positive thing that was coming from such a healthy place, why do we have to stay up? We should say, yeah, awesome, let's go to sleep. Thank you. And the answer is that as divine as Torah is, and this goes back, actually, the Gemara talks about a story. Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the mountain and he ascended to heaven, and he comes and he wants them. The angels are shooting bolts of lightning and attacking him and freaking out. And he says to God, what do I do? These angels are going to kill me. So Hashem says, hold on to my throne. It'll protect you. So he holds on. And then the angels say, well, how dare you come and take the Torah to a world of people? And, people are bad. And Torah is spiritual. It belongs up with us here in heaven. How dare you take it down to man on earth? So Moshe turns to Hashem and says, what do I say? And Hashem says, I don't know, figure it out. You want to take it, figure out why you shouldn't present an argument. Like, what? So Moshe Rabbeinu turns to them and says to the angels, look what it says in the Torah. The Torah says, honor your parents. The Torah says, don't steal. The Torah says, don't kill. The Torah says, don't be jealous. You're angels. You don't have parents. You are not capable of experiencing jealousy. You're not capable of stealing. The Torah is not talking to you. The Torah is talking to us. The Torah is here. Look at the words in the Torah. The Torah was written and designed as a guide for us to live in a physical world and to bring divinity. Divinity doesn't need to be activated in heaven. It's natural. The novelty, the real achievement is activating divinity on earth. That's why the Torah is being given to us. The Torah says, you people who are fallible and may experience an urge to steal and may experience an urge to kill and may be inclined to experience jealousy and may be inclined to not honor your parents, etc., etc., etc. You people follow these guidelines and do what you're supposed to. And when you do, you will be transforming the nature of the world and making the mundane world divine. So as spiritual and incredible as the divinity inside of Torah is, the point of it is not just divinity. The point of it is to take it and bring it here and use it. Use it, I say that carefully because Torah is not a means to an end, but to follow its guidelines and in doing so uplift the world and make it a better place, unite matter and spirit. And this is where we went wrong. The motivation was good. It was coming from a good place. But it wasn't the right perspective. Yes, receiving the Torah in a state of the soul being freed of the body would have allowed a greater interaction and a greater experience of receiving the Torah. But that's not the point. Like the angels already have it. And Moshe took it away. And when Moshe presented those arguments, it was like, yeah, what? Game over. You win. Because it's very clear. You can't argue with that. Like, look at what the Torah says. It's clearly meant for us, not for them. It's meant for people. It's not meant for angels. And because of this is exactly the same reason why, as much as it was a noble pursuit to an extent to want to go to sleep, like, it's not like we didn't care. We wanted to do the right thing, or to an extent it was coming from a relatively good place, but it was also missing the point. The point is the soul in the body, as partners, interacting with the physical world that the soul can only do when it's working together with the body and through the body, then it can follow the guidelines of the Torah to uplift the world and bring divinity into the physical world, into the matter of the world, into the experiences of the world, into the processes of the world. And this is why it was wrong. This is why we're making up for it today. So, when it explains that when it says that the sleep on this night of Shavuos was sweet and the insects didn't disturb them, it was because there was something very powerful going on. This was a really powerful phenomenon. It was millions of people. There are varying opinions. One of the commentaries, I think it's Targum Yonason, maybe says that for every one of the 600,000 people who was counted, there were 5 children. There was also their wives. So we're talking at least 1.2 million plus another 3 million. We're talking at least 4 million people, according to him, for at least 4.2.
All sleeping at the same time.
Right, so it was this collection of, at the very least 2 million for sure, possibly 4, 5, 6 million people who collectively said, let's go to sleep, let's free our souls of our bodies so we can get the Torah in the deepest possible way. This was a very powerful movement. Oh, no, it's still going. I just heard a click. Okay, thank you. This was a very powerful event. This was a very powerful phenomenon. And it was sweet. It was positive. It was coming from a good place, and the connection was deep. The sleep was deep. And the insects said, no, we're not getting involved in this. They stayed away. But at the end of the day, it wasn't right. It was coming from a relatively good place, but it was missing the point. And this is why, to this day, and this is why Hashem didn't rock up and say, whoa, guys, good idea, let's do this. Hashem said, what are you doing, thunder and lightning? Wake up now. Let's get your souls back in your bodies so we can do this the way it's supposed to be done. The way that Moshe just argued to the angels, to get them to not strike him down with lightning when he was trying to bring the Torah down to you. So this is, and this is really, really important to us every minute of every day. It's, it can happen that a person learns Torah, learns about spirituality, etc., etc., and all these things, and it's possible to miss the point, and it can come from a relatively good place, pursuing divinity and godliness, etc. But this reminds us the point is to take all of that, connect with spirituality, get into spirituality, become obsessed with it, but remember that the point of that is to bring it into the world and make it a part of the world and transform and uplift the world. The point's not to let go of the world and shift towards spirituality. It's to connect with spirituality so that we can bring it back into the world through our interactions with the world, following the guidelines of the Torah. That's what it's about. It's about souls and bodies together changing the world.